Community Bridges. And we first found out about him. I was looking at Facebook, and there was an event that had come and gone, that was organized by United Way with organization like the one Dutron is with, to help people who were falling behind in their rent because of COVID-19, help them financially with funds that were given by the state of California. And I was wondering, Dutron, if you could tell us a little bit more about that, and if there are people in our audience who need these funds, how can they access them?
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and I apologize for joining you late. Had some Zoom problems that updated in the middle
Oh,
of trying to log in.
kidding. We never
So
have
the
those.
challenge. I'm delighted to be here and be able to share with our audience that you all know about SB 91 that passed early this year. The governor signed it, basically provided $2.6 billion federal assistance money through the state. So for folks who have been impacted as of April 1st, 2020 through all the way to March 31st, 2021, were unable to pay their rent, this money could be available. It used to be 80% of the funds could be available to the landlord. So this is not directed to the tenant, but however, it removes the burden from the tenant by making sure the landlords are getting compensated. And as of today, I was just on a call this afternoon, that number is now going to be 100% of, so the landlord had to agree to waive the 20% to get the 80%. And if the landlord refuses to participate, then the tenant will get 25% of what they owe per month accumulatively during that period of time. So it's good news that we went from 80 to 100%. Just this way, there's no excuse for a landlord not to apply and access these resources. However, we are one of the three organizations in town, part of the Santa Cruz County Local Network Partnership with CAB, ourselves and Families Together, working to help folks complete the application. The application is a little bit of cumbersome, takes about 90 minutes to complete. The landlord one takes up to 2 hours, a little bit longer, depends on how many unit. And then we don't match, but the state will match the two application based on address and certain criteria and basically send the funds. So far, we hear from the state, the money is being released. We haven't seen anybody in Santa Cruz County, but we're gonna keep applying. And the other part that I wanted to share with you is we applied for $900,000 to be able to do a robust community-based outreach. And we received 1/12 of that to do the outreach. So, but we're still doing the work because this is our community and we want to make sure people at least apply. So if folks live in the northern part of the county, they can access through the Live Oak Family Resource Center, Nueva Vista Family Resource Center, and I'll put that in the chat in a few minutes. Or you could also call United Way, the 211 number, and you can just say you're looking for a COVID-19 rental relief program, and they will connect to one of the partners. So if you live in the southern part of the county, then that would be led by CAB and Families in Transition, followed by La Manzana Family Resource Center. So that's what I could share with you. So that's really available right now. And if folks are even, if they think they're going to be behind in their rent moving forward, they can still apply and the state will determine. There's also a utility relief fund in there. They're trying to tie it both to rent. So if you're unable to pay your utilities as well, there's some funds, but priorities being given to rent. As we all know, rent takes a large amount of the paycheck if you're working, and if not even working, but if you're getting any other unemployment and so on. So, and we're working also with our local utility companies for them to promote the program and advertise it. So we invite you to help us with the outreach. We're not getting enough people to apply. Our numbers are pretty low. So this is a free resource. It doesn't cost any of us. If we apply, at least there's a chance we could be 80% debt free. or now maybe 100%. So yes, it doesn't give, doesn't put money in your pocket, but you don't have to have that debt either. So basically it's waiving 1 year of rent free, and at the same time shouldn't impact your credit. So there's a lot of benefit to it. In addition, separate from that, however, let's say a landlord is not interested but wants to go through the eviction process and trying to create that challenge for a tenant, we are working with the Conflict Resolution Center to support the tenants and trying to resolve the issue outside of the courts. So as of June 15th, once the moratorium is lifted, I think the courts are going to be flooded, people trying to evict. And the federal program right now, I don't know how much you guys, I assume you know, but the federal court has overturned the moratorium. However, in California, we still have our moratorium in place until June 30th. And not at the moment, but hopefully maybe July, August. We're also, Community Bridges has taken the lead on providing a legal clinic for folks who are impacted by eviction challenges. One of the things we know is the folks who owns these property can afford to get a legal representation and be able to have a robust case in the court system. Tenants are unable to navigate the court system, so they're at disadvantage. So we're trying to level. We have an initial investment from Packard Foundation to help us hire one lawyer. So we're right now in the process of advertising for a lawyer who specializes in housing to be able to provide. And our goal is to serve up to 100. That's not the need. We're working with the cities and the county trying to apply for a block grant to see if we can fund a project for 3 years, because we know the need it exists. So that's what I can tell you what's going on with us. I hope that's helpful.
Before, I have a couple of questions that I hope you will debate with vigor once I've asked them. But before we do that, I would like to thank Paz also for coming. Paz is the Housing Prevention and Intervention Program Director at the Santa Cruz Community Action Board. And Paz, I wanted to ask you if you could tell us a little bit about what that organization does for the people in the county, for renters in the county.
Sure, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank
you all. My name is Paz Padilla. I'm the director of the Housing Prevention and Intervention Service for Community Action Board. Thank you to all of you for being here. So CAP, as you know, CAP has been in existence for over 55 years, and our mission is to eliminate poverty and create social changes. Right now, the department has grown significantly over the 8 years. CAP has grown significantly over the 8 years under the administration of Maria Elena de la Garza. Currently, we have 6 departments, but each department has different programs. My department, the Housing Prevention Program, is the homeless/housing department, and I oversee 3 homeless programs. Known as the youth homeless response teams, who helps with homeless over between the ages of 15 and 24, do case management and help them get housed. Our Watsonville Works, which is any homeless individual in the city of Watsonville over the age of 18, we do a 12-day transitional work experience with them and wraparound services, and also trying to get them housed. Our South County Roaming Assessor, which is a county's connection to the county's coordinated entry system. She connects homeless to this system through the county to get services throughout agencies in Santa Cruz County. And our last one is a rental assistance program. This is the funding that we get through the city of Watsonville, through the city of Santa Cruz, where we can help people prevent them from getting evicted from their homes. So we have this program where we help individuals with rental assistance. The other program that we have, and it's through our Thriving Immigrant Coalition Collaborative, through TIC, is our no barrier, low barrier rental assistance. This aims rental assistance for those individuals that don't have a legal status and that do not have a lease agreement. All those screenings go through our rental assistance program. Once we screen those individuals, then we'll go ahead and send them to the correct program. So our rental assistance program is for those that live in Watson, in Santa Cruz County, that have families with children, have a lease agreement, for over the age of 60, for those who are disabled. So our rental assistance programs will go ahead and assist those individuals. But those individuals that don't have a lease agreement, that don't have a legal status, those individuals will go through our Thriving Immigrant Collaborative to get helped for the rental assistance or other needs that they might have. And in collaboration with Dutron and, doing the California rental assistance program. So we really want to echo, if you can please help us promote this program, because the funding is there, but again, we're not getting a lot of tenants nor landlords applying for this program. So your advocacy in this issue would greatly help us. And if you have any other questions, I know Justin went ahead and put CAB's Inc. link into the chat. Please feel free to go in there, and we're happy to help you and serve you and continue the collaboration with all of you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask a question, and I hope that you will all chime in, because it's a bit of a hot spot here. What rent control measures that are currently in place do you think are effective in helping provide affordable and equitable housing in the county? What measures could be improved, and what measures seem to be missing? I'm going to throw in something that I personally feel very strongly, is that the concept of affordable housing is actually a joke. That the median income in Santa Cruz County is $110,000 for a family of 4. And affordable housing is 80% of that, at different levels, going down from there. That's $80,000 a year, and that's a huge salary that's required just to qualify for affordable housing, if I understand it correctly. I would throw in the discussion that we could possibly rethink that concept so that we go back to what people think it should be. You should be able to use 25 or 30% of your salary to pay for rent, and not 80 to 110% of your rent, or live with 10 people in one place, or like that. So I'd love to address that issue with you, if you will. And
I'll start. As Justin says, for a while now, we've had a 20% inclusionary ordinance. Actually, in the 1990s, when I was part of a community group that presented the idea from we had a housing task force, and we presented to the city council the inclusionary ordinance. At that time, we were 25% affordable, but we were not getting a lot of development. And so then later on, about 10 years later, it was reduced to 20%. And we've been very, very successful with a 20% inclusionary. However, when it's defined as affordable under the inclusionary, basically it's for moderate and upper income families that could qualify, like for teachers, police officers, nurses. In terms of for the low income families, how we in Watsonville help those is we have programs that help with down payments. And that's how those low income families might be able to afford the inclusionary affordable housing, because otherwise they would not be able to qualify for that housing because of what you described, Erica.
anyone else?
I think one of the reasons why we lean so hard on the idea of rent control as a solution rather than inclusionary housing. Inclusionary housing is great, but it's clearly not enough, because the numbers don't work out, right? Like, I mean, most low-income people rent, and most middle-income people at this point in cities like San Francisco, and maybe Santa Cruz too, I'm not sure, rent as well. And so in order for and what we've been really disturbed by is there's these political pressures to reduce the percentage of inclusionary housing. And then there's political pressures to change the definition of affordability to higher and higher levels so that ultimately developers are paying less in paying for less affordability, right? Like reducing the value that they're giving back to the community in return for the right to build their fancy housing.
I
And then
agree.
on top of that, there's this piece of the puzzle where that we've talked a lot about in the Bay, about how each high income unit sort of brings with it the need for lower income people to sort of handle the service industry needs of that person, right? Whether it's the people who do the house cleaning or the dog walking or the dry cleaning or whatnot. They're basically you can't have a city of all high income people, and you can't have a city of 20% high income people or 20% middle income people and no low income people. That basically every new unit brings with it all of these other needs that aren't getting paid for. So yeah, it's just the numbers don't work. It's like it's market failure, right? And
Well,
so
there's a conflict with developers and the pull and tug in Santa Cruz to to build as few as possible affordable housing, but to give one more just so I can have two more stories on my big building, it makes me personally sick. I don't think it's possible to have a solution like this. The riverfront complex ended up being 11% affordable units in exchange for having 7 stories high. That just boggles the mind when we're supposed to stay at least at 15%. So that you're right. The issue is rent control more than inclusionary units. Do you agree, panelists? Justin?
I was going to answer the first question.
Sorry, go ahead.
To the question about, what do we have in place that's effective? Well, the city of Santa Cruz passed an exorbitant rent increase ordinance back in January of 2019. And more or less what that says is that, and I'm trying to remember it correctly, you can't have more than an increase of no more than 5% in the first year and 7 in 2 years. And if you increase it more than that, then someone can ask for relocation assistance from their landlords. The problem is that, so probably since I've been on the council and even now, many of the council members, initially it was myself, Councilmember Brown, Councilmember Crone, and Councilmember Glover. There appeared to be support for just through community conversations with other members of the public. And then after my colleagues were recalled, there was, mention that they were supportive of a rental data collection program. And that really would have helped us better understand how, rents are fluctuating in our community. That's still kind of pending. And Councilmember Brown and I, because we were working on a subcommittee together, we are still trying to push for that. And we're still trying to get some way of being able to track how are rents changing throughout the community, what's the percentage of units that could be considered quote unquote affordable versus market rate. And this isn't something new. It's something that's happened, that it's a program that exists in many cities throughout California and throughout the nation. However, there likely won't be the political will to make that program happen. But that's one of the key things that we need to be able to track to make sure that we're seeing how effective these programs are. There's no way to know, because without having some way to track metrics, it's just hearsay, right? And but so it's hard to understand whether that program is effective or not currently. And I just would say that there's a huge disconnect currently between increases in income and earnings versus the escalation of cost of living. And those two things are completely out of whack. And so I think that, we need to do something it'd be great if we could get rent control back. There's a lot of barriers to overcome at the state level in order to make that happen. But ultimately, what we really need is for that gap between cost of living and income to be closed so that people can afford homes again that are being built, so that we're not saying, it's all luxury, condominiums that are being built and only rich people can afford them. It needs to get to a point where anything that's being built is something that your average person can afford. And so that's really the big fight is, because for example, I've got my PhD in multiple degrees. I have a full-time job working at the university in a pretty good academic position. And I've got 3 roommates, right? And I imagine that there are people who are, teachers that are working in service industry or otherwise that are trying to raise families and are in similar situations where they either have to work multiple jobs or they have to have roommates in order to survive in this community. And that's just unacceptable, especially knowing that there are people in the community who bought, their homes as grad students, 30, 40 years ago on the wages they were making then. And now that house is, they probably bought it, less than $100,000. And now that house is worth 1.2 million. There's no reason why we should see that amount of wealth being gained on something that you purchase for the purposes of solely being able to exist. So, I think that there's a lot of issues that we have, and we're going to have to overcome them in order to make our community more affordable.
I would like to add in terms of what Justin just shared in terms of the multi-million houses that go for sale. It has an impact on Watsonville in that it raises the cost of housing in Watsonville because of those multi-million dollar sales that occur in North County. And I just want to add in Watsonville, and Justin alluded to it, in Watsonville, and I don't know what percentage, but it's a large percent. We're primarily a farm worker city, and many of our farm workers, there's 2, 3, even 4 families living in one household because they can't afford a rent on their own. And this is something that back before we even had the inclusionary ordinance in the late 1980s, a group of us would go to city council after city council saying, we have these generational families in this housing and we need affordable housing. And at that time, that particular city council just didn't pay any attention to us. And it wasn't until after the lawsuit that we changed from at-large elections to single-member district elections that we had new city council members. And then they were the ones that listened to the Housing Task Force and began to provide affordable housing through our inclusionary ordinance. But it still remains, even now, we have multiple families in one household, and we're unable to change that.
I'd like to bring in a comment by someone in the audience, Jerry, who's been commenting a lot. He's assuming that we're all homeowners, and I am one of them, but I think a lot of us are renters. But he is saying that subsidies for homeowners are extremely high. They're in billions of dollars, and that because homeowners are getting subsidized for something that eventually escalates, as Justin has pointed out, renters have to pay higher taxes than they would have had to. He feels that renters are paying the subsidy for homeowners. Do you have any comments on that?
Well, I don't know what subsidies he's talking about. I am a homeowner, but I was a renter for many years before I became a homeowner. And I was able to 3 years ago buy a home in the senior area, but I bought it as an investment for my children. And currently, my tenant, under the state legislation, he claims he's been financially impacted by the COVID, and so he's only paying 25% of his rent. His rent is $2,000, but he's only paying $500. So the loan is over $2,000. So every month I have to pay $1,500 out of pocket. So I am not receiving any money, any subsidy in terms of being able to have any extra money. So I don't
I'm
know.
assuming, I'm assuming he's referring to the tax breaks you get from the interest you pay on your mortgage or things like that. That we are receiving a tax break from the interest part of the mortgage. That's a subsidy that we get.
Right, but I mean, in the full disclosure, I'm a homeowner, but I was in Justin's place. I lived with 6 people after I graduated, and
Yeah.
the city I wanted to live in was Santa Cruz, and my second home, my home ended up being Watsonville. I had to drive 20 miles south to be able to afford what I can get, and I was at the threshold of not making enough to qualify for the city program. I made just enough. I couldn't qualify. So it took 60-70% of my income to pay my mortgage. I think the solution is not a single bullet. It's a combination of all of us working, seeing that number of renters to go down and encouraging people into home ownership, because it has a benefit in the long term. There's security, there's wealth built into it. And the way we do that is also banks have to be part of that. The credit unions have to be part of that. I remember how many of them rejected me and which one accepted me and what percentage they gave me. So it's a complex issue. As I look back, there's no way I could afford to buy a house now. I bought it at the bottom of the market. I got lucky. A lot of things went well. But at the same time, I see my property increase in Watsonville, I am concerned how other people are going to, it just seems surreal. The numbers are changing. Yeah, so it cuts a lot of people out of it. So if we're thinking we want people to get out of having, rent to own possibilities, a program to look at is how can we give people in the long term that they're not for life are going to be renters? How can we get them into homes that they can afford to be able to own? Because that's the only way we can solve this issue in part. So.
We have some ideas to present tomorrow at the tomorrow session, but Chris, you have a comment? You're raising your hand?
Yeah, I just wanted to say the elephant in the room here is huge, and it's up on the hill there at UC Santa Cruz. I work for Santa Cruz. I have 2 degrees from UC Santa Cruz. And they're handling the situation in an appalling manner, because it sounds like it's counterintuitive, but the more housing they build up on campus, the more rents go up in the city of Santa Cruz. And just if you look at their housing rates for this 2021, I have it on my screen, it is $1,300 for a triple, right? That's 3 students paying almost $4,000 for a triple. And they go off campus and they have their own rooms they could do for that, but a lot of them double up. And that family that was living there moves to South County. They move to Watsonville, then Gonzales, then Hollister. And it's this trickle, sometimes it's a snowball coming down the hill too. And I think that we really have to put pressure on the university. It's over. They cannot grow past 19,500. We need a moratorium on further growth. And the plan they have in place now will just kill the city of Santa Cruz. There is 10,000 more students coming and about 3,000 or 4,000 more staff and faculty. We need a vacancy tax. We need what Councilmember Cummings was alluding to, real estate transfer tax. The city's not benefiting on these $1 million home sales right now. We're at 55 cents. I think Deepa would probably tell you what San Francisco is doing. It's incredible what their real estate transfer tax is compared to ours. They have a huge amount of money they're getting from that every year. Ours, we get a paltry amount. We get maybe $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 when these homes change hands. We need a vacancy tax, and I hope that's going to be on the ballot in the next election.
And that will be talked about tomorrow, which is very cool. Cindy Dawson's going to talk about the vacancy tax, which is one kind of pretty big solution if we pass it, as well as a community land trust organization that works at getting land that will be owned by the renters themselves. It's a concept that's going to be there tomorrow. Are there any more comments about this? Because that's actually the meat of the problem, I think. And Jerry, who's been very vocal, silently vocal, but typing a lot in the chat and in the Q&A, really sees us as homeowners as enemies, renters opposed to each other, which it sounds like not much solution. How can we bridge that ditch that is between us? It's clear that those of us who own a home are privileged, and we have that short of selling it and distributing the money to everybody, I don't know how else we can give back or what we can do to make it the share. And Justin and Deepa are both wanting to comment, so please go ahead. One of you. You don't need to raise your head. You get your hand. You can just jump in. Go ahead.
I'm a tenant.
Yes.
And everybody I work with in my organization is a tenant.
You just muted yourself, Deepa.
Everyone in my organization is a tenant at this point, and we're likely to be tenants our whole lives because that's the direction our economy is going. And when I talk to folks who have the option of becoming a homeowner, or who are trying to, homeownership is a major goal of theirs, and that's like something that they're prioritizing in their lives and something that's a possibility for themselves based on what they're living and their incomes or whatnot. And I ask them, they always say that it's about, and when I'm usually talking to folks who are fairly progressive and share values with me, it's usually has to do with wanting to have a stable and secure place to live and not believing that they're going to get that in a rental. And I asked them if we could guarantee that housing was stable and secure and that you would have an affordable rent and you had choices about where you could live and autonomy over your home to some extent, would you feel like you needed to buy a home? And the answer is almost always no. In Germany, I don't know the exact stats, but I've heard that the stats in Germany where there is vacancy control and rent control pretty broadly, about 80% of the population rents instead of owns, even though many of those folks have high enough incomes to travel and to lead really high, lives with like a pretty level of high level of quality of life. So it's interesting to me because I think my goal and what I see as my goal as a housing advocate is really about housing stability. And I have seen ways in which homeowners and tenants have been pitted against each other. I've seen that happen in San Francisco politically. I've seen that happen across the country. I've seen the real estate industry do that in their ads when they fight us on rent control and when they fight us on all kinds of measures that I've tried to work on. Prop G was a pretty classic example in San Francisco back in 2014 where we tried to tax speculation, where basically the real estate industry went after homeowners as a group that votes in larger numbers than renters, and there's a group that's more stably, that easier to find in terms of voter rolls, and said basically your investment is going to be trash if you vote for this tax. Basically, if you do these things that make speculation harder, you will lose. And they succeeded in defeating our measure. And I've seen that happen with rent control also. And I think so that sucks, right? Because and I do think there are a number of homeowners out there that have bought into the line that the reason we own homes is so we can speculate on this property and so that we can continue to build wealth and continue to be more and more secure while at the expense of other people, or that we don't have to care about other people and it's really about us in our own little bubble of like this property we own. But I have seen that in terms of the progressive policies we've passed in San Francisco, we wouldn't have been able to do it without some significant percentage of homeowners siding with us. Majority of homeowners usually didn't, but a significant percentage did for us to pass Prop C, which is the most progressive tax we passed in recent years, where we taxed corporations in order to build homeless housing, or Prop 15 to increase the minimum wage, or any number of other things. So I would say that strategically speaking, we can't write off all homeowners. Practically speaking, some homeowners have bought into this sort of fake American dream idea that is less and less true about being able to protect yourself from economic insecurity through homeownership. And in reality, I have seen homeowners sometimes be at the forefront of campaigns and be very supportive and very helpful. But I think the best campaigns, and I think politically speaking, I think it's best if tenants are at the center of their own futures and their own destiny, and that these movements are led by tenants.
I agree. Justin?
Yeah, I'll be brief. And I will just say again that I'm a tenant. I'm a tenant still. I was a tenant as the mayor of Santa Cruz, and I'll probably be a tenant for at least, the next half decade, because, it's really difficult to save money in Santa Cruz when you're paying so much rent. And I'm actually pretty fortunate. I have a really great landlord who doesn't really increase my rent. And I wish that there were more people like him in our community. And the sad thing is that we're going to start seeing less and less of those people over time, because many of these people have been here for long periods of time. They're able to keep their rents low because they've owned their houses, 30, 40 years, and they feel like they're in a position where they don't have to charge high rents because they get enough out of their tenants as it is, and they own their properties outright. And due to Prop 13, they're probably not paying a whole lot in property taxes. And so we're fortunate, but this is an aging population that as they pass or they pass their houses down to their children, those houses are going to be sold, or oftentimes what we see is the children increase the rent on those houses. And so to the extent, and I know it was mentioned earlier, I know there's members of the Santa Cruz community who are working on this housing trust. And to the extent we can get something like that going sooner than later,
Yeah.
and really try to get people to buy into, like, hey, you have an affordable house and we would like it to go into this trust that we can, upkeep that house and keep those rents low and affordable. To the extent that we can work with people to see if they're willing to do that, it'd be great to try to keep some of that housing stock in the community, because it's either, it gets sold and then that raises the value, or they get demolished and they get replaced by something else that's even more expensive. I worked on the rent control campaign in Santa Cruz, and I was one of the highest signature gatherers, which is why people like Chris came up to me and asked me if I'd be willing to run for council, which I wasn't considering at the time, and I ended up being the highest vote getter. And so I'm still, I think that there still needs to be an opportunity for us, especially now after what happened with the Schools and Communities First campaign getting defeated. I think there's a time when we need to come together to start thinking about, what it is that we need to do to see these campaigns be successful. There's obviously a ton of money coming in from, apartment association and other big industries, but, where are the areas where we're, what are we missing, and where are areas where we can find opportunities so that the next time we launch a campaign that we can be successful? Because, and until we overturn some of these laws at the state level, we're not going to be able to see change. And so to the extent we can continue working together and building coalitions and really pushing towards overturning some of these laws, I think that we'll be able to make a difference at some point. And then finally, one thing I do want to say as well is that, and it's something I've really been focusing on, and there's a lot of folks in Santa Cruz right now throughout the county that are working on it, but really pushing towards workforce development and really targeting underrepresented communities. I know that, and I'm guilty of it too, really pushing back against the tech industry and, not, really wanting to see tech come into the communities. But I think what we really need to start focusing on is, one, tech is not going away. If there's one thing that the pandemic taught us, it's actually probably going to be, more a part of our lives than ever. And as a result, how can we get people from backgrounds that have been largely excluded from tech and from those industries into jobs that are good paying jobs, so that they're able to uplift themselves financially? I mean, we can't keep fighting against something that's coming towards us. We really have to embrace the change that's coming and really figure out, how do we get our Latino youth, our Black youth, people who've largely been, in these systems of poverty into good paying jobs, and really putting pressure on these corporations and these industries that have excluded these groups for so long, really putting diversity at the forefront and forcing them to really start to provide opportunities for people who've been excluded for long periods of time. That's, if we want to, take communities that have been impoverished for long periods of time and help them gain wealth, we have to give them the tools and resources that they need so they can get there.
I totally agree with that. And I think even connecting the high schools to the amazing junior college that we have as an extension, because a high school degree means nothing except get a minimum wage job. So you need an AA or a BA, in my agency, that's one of the criteria, unless you have work experience. So I think it's connecting education as well as financial literacy and awareness. That's the other piece, is when you sit and you do your budget and you see that 50, 60, 70% of your money is going to rent, it's not sustainable, right? The only way it becomes sustainable is if you keep moving somebody else to live with you, and one turns into two to three. So before you know it, you're living in your living room, not in your bedroom. So I think there is a huge educational gap that we're seeing, both an opportunity and equity. So that has to be part of conversation. And second, I think Chris talked about the university. I'm a slug, a proud slug. But however, when you move from the hill to town, you do disturb the rental community and how much you're willing to pay versus, if I'm paying $200 less than when I'm on campus, I'm going to take that. But now I am increasing the property in the city of Santa Cruz and the neighboring. So it does have an impact. And I think we, as former slugs or continue to be slugs, we have a role in having that conversation, because we bridge the two communities. I see myself both Santa Cruzian as well as UCSC. So I don't have a allegiance to one or the other, but we can bridge that difference, as well as bridging Watsonville to Santa Cruz. That's another division, as we can't just keep pushing people out to Watsonville and beyond, because at some point they're no longer going to be in the county. So I just want to.
That's a point I wanted to ask you. For this conference, we invited, we tried to include, the county of Santa Cruz has very different populations of renters that actually don't know each other very well. We have farm workers, we have new arrivals in the country, we have service workers, we have young professionals, we have students. All these people kind of have their own world and their own challenges for renting. What would be amazing, I think, is to unite all of these groups and to find some common things that they as a group and as a large force could work on to make circumstances a little bit easier for all renters in Santa Cruz County. I know I sound like a politician, but it's true. If we only know our little group, we're not very strong. So I wonder what are the things. For instance, there's rent control, I think, in Watsonville to some extent. Watsonville is already in districts, which Santa Cruz isn't. There's so many huge differences that affect renting. What is the common thread that gives a whole population of renters a bit more power?
Well, what comes to my mind is a few things. One, although it is getting thinner, I'm a native of Watsonville, and so I have experienced the division between North County and South County, almost all my life. Now that division is getting thinner. For example, Justin and I talk to each other, whereas in the past, nobody would talk to each other from North County to South County. And so that division is getting thinner. And so we, the North and South really do have to come together. So that's one point. The other point is in South County, because we have a high rate of undocumented residents, they are, and perhaps Paz can talk more about it, they are more reluctant to form partnerships with anybody outside their immediate family or, network. And that's a big issue that would have to be addressed. And I'm not sure how to address that. Paz, you have any thoughts?
I agree with you, Rebecca. We do see these part of individuals, being reluctant and being part of the community, but I think it has to do with that they don't feel part of a community. One, maybe because they're just here as a passing, because most of them, especially our farm workers, they come, they work the strawberry, and boom, they're out doing something else, maybe in Oxnard or Santa Maria, because they're still working on the strawberry fields. So it's that feeling of passing by versus being a community here in Watsonville, because that tends to happen with most of our farm workers. And the other ones is that 6 months here, 6 months in their hometown, right? We still have a lot of individuals, a lot of families that consider themselves just 6 months in this area, and then boom, I'm going to go back to Mexico or to my other country, and it's going to be that 6 months. So again, it's that feeling of passing. It's not feeling of community. So I think that's where we need to change the perspective and understanding that this is just a culture thing, or this is just a need that they have, because all their lives, this is what they used to do, or this is what they do. There's families that end up staying in Watsonville, like me being one. See, my parents came back in the 74s. They were just going to pass Watsonville. They were not going to stay in Watsonville, but yet they realized that Watsonville had a lot to offer them, and they ended up staying. So I think it's that this has been happening for many, many centuries. And how do we change that? Or what can we do as a community to make them feel more a community sense and not like a passing sense?
Yeah, that's Esther is in our audience, and she's asked if she can speak. And after that, I'd like to read a question from Darius as well. So, go ahead, Esther.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. I've written some in the chat, so I won't repeat those. But the main one I wanted to bring up while we're talking about how to unite renters, most people are not aware that the state has, the California Democratic Party has a newly created renter council. And the goal of that council is to be the voice of renters. There's 18 million renters in the state. That's 45% of the residents of the state. And each individual city here in Monterey, where I am, most of our cities are over 60% renters. So by joining this renter council and participating in it, the goal is to take the issues up the chain within the Democratic Party that will reach the elected officials all along the way in Sacramento. And ultimately, the most powerful thing that we can do as renters is turn out and vote. Because with those kind of numbers, we can decide elections. And we have a couple of cases here in our county that we last election and the one before, we elected the most diverse council members that we've ever had, because we motivated and empowered the renter vote. So I know you guys, I know some of you from working with you on the MBEP task force, the Renter Assistance Task Force, and I encourage you all to look up the California Democratic Renters Council, and we are turning out to city council meetings to support different initiatives, and the goal is to educate and empower the renters to get out there, because the votes are important, and that's how we're going to get policy changed.
Thank you. That's actually a good resource. Dutron, would you like to add something?
Sure. Yeah, I think, in my current position, just I have experience, one of our partners that I really want to encourage for all of us, and it's easily accessible, COPA. And if you don't know about COPA, I'll put it in the chat. They're an organization, faith-based as well as nonprofits, like a coalition of organization, communities organized for relational power and action. And what I can tell you, the difference that has made, at least for me, sitting as a homeowner, listening to folks who have been impacted as renters, was hearing stories. I think that's how you start to bridge the differences between tenant and landlord is stories, and also across different renters. So I think COPA is a really relational way of having these conversations before we go to action. So we have to connect. I have to know who Justin is. I have to know, start to feel comfortable, then be able to support and outreach. So I think we're so fragmented, and in our own camp, I think one way we could do is continue to have these kind of conversation, but across renter communities, from north to south, from students to minimum low wage workers to high end wage workers as well, who are renting those luxury apartments, to have a conversation, because you need to get everybody enlisted. And COPA has, I mean, the power they have, I can tell you, I was surprised how they were able to call our representatives in California at state capitol. We're telling them about the problem we're having with SB 91. So they're able to have access to our legislators and people who make decisions. So I encourage you. I'm learning about COPA and getting involved myself. And that's one way you can organize. And it's not about landlord or tenant or South County, North County. It's all about, we're all in this as a healthy community.
Can you put the link in there for us, Dutron? Can you put the link for us?
Yeah, I think he did.
Oh, he did. Okay, thank you. Darius has made a point that's interesting. He believes that because of Prop 13, we're getting homeowners are getting away with very low property taxes, and he feels that one of the ways to bring more revenue in, but maybe for housing instead of for education, would be to have an additional tax for homeowners that adds to the small amount we pay already because we bought our house a long time ago. It's not my case, but in his case, he bought a triplex in 1986 and he's paying $3,300 in taxes. And he feels that is, extremely low, and that actually does hurt everybody else. Those are the kind of subsidies I think that Jerry was referring to. That's a suggestion.
I'm definitely not getting any subsidies. So I think it's, each case are unique. And I think, as we do these conversations, we have to be mindful. We're all in this trying to solve the problem. We're not enemies, but we're allies. So I just want to invite, language is important in my type of work. So I am thoughtful and mindful. So I want to encourage all of us to be cordial in that way.
Yeah. I don't know if you detected a lack of courtesy from me, but there wasn't any. I was just pointing out that property taxes for people who have had their house for a very long time is very low, and that there is a suggestion has, in my opinion, some merit. I think that people who bought a house now are completely screwed as far as property taxes are concerned, but not those who've been sitting, and that's a generation that is not particularly liked by a lot of renters. It's the older people who bought their houses a long time ago and who sit on a gold mine at the expense of others.
And in addition to the property tax that we currently pay, we also have to pay insurance. And if we live in a flood area, we also have to pay flood insurance, and the flood insurance is very, very expensive. So not all homeowners are getting that subsidy that he might think.
Where are we here? I'm trying to see if there are other questions in the Q&A. We kind of, and Deepa had to leave early, so she didn't get a chance to say goodbye, and I'm sorry about that. We'll say goodbye tomorrow. She's great. Are there any questions in the audience? If you have any, can you type them in Q&A or chat, please? There's a lot of comments from Jerry, and they're basically Jerry sees really two opposing bodies between homeowners and renters that I don't see a way to bridge that in his mind, but.
Can you, I don't remember all the questions you listed, but the very last one had to do with renters and developers not wanting
Yeah.
to. Okay, can you ask that question?
Absolutely. So the question is this: some critics say that rent control measures, which restricts the maximum price of rent on specific units, actually hurt renters because they de-incentivize developers and landlords from renting out units. How would you respond to this?
And what I wanted to say, at least in Watsonville, that's not the case because, as you know, the Costa-Hawkins Act exempts any units built in the last 15 years from rent control. And so any new developer in Watsonville knows that at least for 15 years, they won't have to abide by rent control. And every time there's a vacancy, they can rent it at market rate. And then that market rate would then be under rent control after 15 years, but not before that. So in Watsonville, we're not experiencing that. Right now, currently, we have 4 new rental, they're not all going to be rentals. Some are going to be for sale, but we have 4 developments going on in Watsonville right now.
Justin and Chris, could you comment on this question, please, for Santa Cruz City? Like, actually, that is a good question, since we do have a lot of developments in the future here.
Could you rephrase the question, Erica?
Yeah.
I'll reread it. Some critics say that rent control measures, which restrict the maximum price of rent on specific units, actually hurt renters because they de-incentivize developers and landlords from renting out units. So
yeah, I think from my perspective, and Councilmember Cummings can speak, but I think we've reached the limit. I mean, we should not be building any more housing at market rates. We should focus all of our energies through the planning department on people who work here but can't afford to live here. And I think that the council needs to direct the economic development director and the planning department that this is the policy of Santa Cruz. We're going to prioritize. We're not going to say no to the developers who come there, but they're not going to be a priority. And the priority, I just heard the state freed up $5 billion to buy up properties and make them affordable in perpetuity, rather than just build them from the ground up. Sometimes it's much cheaper to buy the property and remodel it. Hotels, motels, and old apartment houses. So that's where I think we should be focused on, and don't care about the developers, because the developers will always be knocking on Santa Cruz's door because it's too nice a place, and every developer thinks they just found something that's too good to be true.
need another council for this. Dutron, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I want to comment to a different question. I think Darius was asking about who controls the funding for SB 91. So that's controlled by the state and depends on each county gets to choose which program they're involved in. So Santa Cruz County has deferred to participate in the state program. So therefore, the funds that we're trying to help bring to our community for tenant and landlord is controlled by the state. Monterey County has decided to do theirs in-house. And so different counties are doing. I hope that answers your question. I just noticed that he asked, so I wanted to respond to that. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah.
The nonprofit doesn't control it. So I just want to be very clear. We have no control over it.
If I can, I'm getting an echo. But if I can make a comment to something that Chris said, that I think really needs to be taken into account is that, you know, when apartment complexes or housing is built, this notion that you have to make it affordable in perpetuity, or you have to lock in that price at which it's sold in perpetuity, is something that's really critical. And so we just had an issue. So we've heard many things coming back and forth from our planning director. And you know, one of the things that he said is, well, if you build it now at market rate, you know, 40 years from now, it'll be affordable because, you know, just over time, the you know, the cost of the housing will go down. And I was just like, no, that's nonsense. And sure enough, he said that back in 2019. I didn't buy that argument. And then last year, there was a proposal for an increase in some developments, an increase in density in an existing development, Cypress Point, which is a pretty old apartment complex in Santa Cruz, that where, like, you know, 1 bedrooms are going for $1,500 to $1,800 a month. And this place was built back in like the mid 70s. And then one question I had at the time, I asked him, I said, so, you know, back about a year ago, you mentioned how if things were built now that 40 years from now, they'll be affordable. This is a place that was built in the 70s. It's 2021. How is a 1-bedroom apartment here now $1,500 a month? And he pretty much said, well, if it's not deed restricted affordable in perpetuity, then if it's sold, the people who buy it can charge whatever they want for it. So I just want that to be clear and out there that, you know, there are these assumptions and people make these arguments saying, well, if you build it now, later on, it'll be affordable. Unless there are deed restrictions in place on affordability, that's the only thing that will maintain something to be affordable in perpetuity. And to the extent that we can make that happen when developments are built, you know, that's all we can do, you know, or I won't say that's all we can do, but that's a critical thing that we can do. And I guess the last point I'll make to what Chris was saying, you know, it's really, I think one of the difficulties around, you know, building affordable housing is getting the subsidies to make the construction of that housing actually happen. So in California, you know, we really want to have our buildings LEED certified so that they're environmentally friendly. If for those of you who've been paying attention right now, the cost of lumber is through the roof, and construction costs are at an all-time high. So anything that gets built, you know, between now and hopefully until we get that under control, you know, it's going to be really expensive. And then when we think about construction, we also think about paying prevailing wage or union wages and providing benefits, and all those costs go into those units. So we have to figure out a way to not only be able to build quality housing, but how do we then get the price of that housing to come down? And I see that largely through, you know, some kind of federal subsidies. So, you know, my hope is that we can all, you know, to Dutron's point, you know, if we can all work together as property owners and renters and people who really want to see, you know, affordable housing exist, it's going to really take us all putting pressure at the state, federal, and local levels to make sure that that message is getting clear and it's out there and that we can make it happen.
I was thinking of your rent, the $1,500, which is a high number, but the 1-bedroom apartments at 555 Pacific are $2,800 a month. So I wanted to see how much $1,500 in 1973 is worth today, and that's $9,000. So there goes my argument. But yeah. 1 bedrooms for $2,800 is.
And then,
And UCSC housing is even more than that, when you put 3 students in a very tiny rooms in
Yeah.
the dorms.
Are there any more questions or comments? We're getting to the end of the first session of this conference. Well, I wanted to tell you a little bit about tomorrow. Tomorrow we're more solution oriented than today. Today, I think we've had a good picture of what the situation is like in North and South counties of the county. And there are solutions that were offered today that I think were very interesting. But tomorrow there's some long-term solutions. We have Cindy Dawson, who's going to speak about the vacancy tax ballot measure that will be there for 2022, and also the land trust, community land trust organization that will talk about how it would affect renters if we actually could own the property that we rent. We also have people, Ann Lopez, who is from the farmers and family organization. So she's going to talk a lot about what the situation is for farm workers in terms of rent. And I got a panel, but anyway, it's a very rich panel tomorrow. Not to forget Carol Fife, who is City Council District 3 in Oakland, who's accomplished amazing number of things. She's like the OAC of the West Coast, and she is giving us a few minutes of her time tomorrow to give us hope and make sure that we could find solutions. So I wanted to thank all the panelists and Deepa, who's not here, for being here tonight. Your time is incredibly valuable, and it's wonderful. It's really appreciated that you spent it with us tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Erica.
And come tomorrow.
Thank you, Erica.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Seeing you.
Good night.
Good night.